What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indies Sports Ticket. You can also catch the live stream on Twitter. Just follow us at Ticket 1430, or you can go to YouTube, search for Indies Sports Ticket, and the live stream should pop up right there for you as well. A lot of Colts stuff today. Finally, I started doing this like during the NFL playoffs, which the Colts were not a part of once again. So I finally get to talk like legitimate Colts football stuff on the air. The NFL schedule release was last night. You know, all the teams came out, released their videos or whatever. The best one is the Chargers. They did this whole Sims thing. If you haven't had an opportunity to go watch that, you should. Now, let's get to the Colts schedule. The Colts are only playing in one primetime game this year, week 11 against the Jets. That is Sunday Night Football. I thought that they'd have one more primetime game, considering that people seem to really like Anthony Richardson this year. So I thought that they'd have one more against, the Texans or the Jags. It's a divisional matchup. The public seems to generally be high on CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence as well as Anthony Richardson. Outside of that, not overly surprised. Like before they released the schedule, I'd already cleared my fall Sunday afternoons starting at 1 o'clock because I just figured that that's where the Colts would be at, because as of right now, the public, the national media views the Colts as a very boring franchise, and boring franchises play at 1 o'clock, not on national television. And look, last night I spent way too much time doing what everybody does when the NFL schedule is released. You grab your favorite team schedule and you work through and you mark off wins and losses. That's what a lot of people do. That is not what I do. I like to put games into three separate categories. Okay, so I've got a should win category, a might win category, and a won't win category, right? So it helps me establish a baseline number of wins and losses. It also provides the range at which the Colts record should fall into, right? I also expect every team to go around 500 in divisional play, because no matter how good or bad your division is, division games are always tougher, right? So let's start in this should win category. This category is pretty self-explanatory. This is all the games that the Colts should win. Will they win all of them? Probably not, because this is the NFL, and the best thing about the NFL is the parity, right? We don't know who's going to win from week to week, right? For example, the Colts lost to the New Orleans Saints last year. And the year before that, the Colts lost to the Washington Commanders. If I had been on the air during that time, I would have classified both of those games as should-win games. But it's the NFL, and teams don't win every single game that they should. If they did, then Vegas wouldn't be doing as well as it is, right? So the Colts' first should-win game of the season comes in Week 3 against the Chicago Bears. Okay, I love Caleb Williams as much as anyone. Okay, and I think he's going to be an absolute stud. But it's going to be early in the season. Therefore, it'll be early in Caleb Williams' career. There's always an adjustment period for every rookie in every sport, right? We saw it with Caitlin Clark and her first game against the Sun on Tuesday night. We're going to see it again tonight because she's playing another game tonight. And so, like, it just takes rookies a certain amount of time to adjust, right? She's probably going to continue to be bad early in the season, talking about Caitlin Clark, just like a lot of rookies in every sport. With this being said, I expect Caleb Williams to struggle early because there's just a difference between playing college football and playing in the NFL. Because they're catching the Bears so early in the season, the Colts should win their game against the Bears. Colts' second should-win game of the season comes in Week 11 when they play the Jets on Sunday Night Football on the road. The Jets are simply not a good football team. The fact that they got 6 primetime games this year, I think, is pretty absurd. But hey, I guess that's what happens when you have Aaron Rodgers on your team. They just throw you into primetime games because that's just kind of the way that it is, right? By week 11, the Colts rookies should have settled into things to a point where they can contribute at high levels. I think Shane Steichen is a much better coach than Robert Saleh. Because of that, they should win this game. I don't think that the Jets have a ton of weapons. I just don't think that the Jets are going to be very good this year. This is a game the Colts should win. Colts' third should-win game of the season comes in Week 13 when they play the Patriots. The Patriots might be the worst team in the NFL this year. They have one of the worst rosters in the NFL. They have a rookie head coach. Like, they're likely going to be playing either a rookie quarterback in Drake May, or they're going to play Jacoby Brissett, who's a career backup in the NFL. On top of all of that, they don't have very many weapons. Okay. So I have no faith whatsoever in the New England Patriots. On top of that, as well, if the Colts lose to the Pats, I will go crazy because the Patriots just aren't a good football team. Right. And then the Colts' fourth and final should win game of the season comes in week 17 when they play the New York Giants. Same idea here as the Patriots. The Giants roster isn't very good. Daniel Jones isn't a very good quarterback. The Giants don't have very many weapons. But to be fair to the Giants, I do think that Brian Dable is a good football coach. But that roster is so bad, I don't think it's going to matter. The Colts are just a better roster with a more competent head coach. Okay, like the baseline for the Colts wins this year is 4. They should win at least 4 football games this year. Okay, like they should beat the Bears in week 3. They should beat the Jets in week 11. They should beat the Pats in week 13. And they should beat the Giants in week 17. Okay, like those seem like 4 wins you can put on the board before the season even starts. And that's honestly a decent number of games that the Colts should win given how average this team was last year. Now let's move into the won't win category. What are the games that, when looking at the schedule, you can just chalk them up as losses? Okay. This is, like I said, for the last one, pretty self-explanatory. These are all the games that the Colts should not win. Will they lose all of them? Probably not, because this is the NFL where parity is king. Okay. For example, the Colts won on the road against the Ravens last year. That would have been a game that I would have classified as a won't win. The year before that, the Colts beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That would have been a game that I would have classified as a won't win game. All right. And so the Colts' first won't win game of the season comes in week 10 when the Colts play the Bills. I don't care how bad the Bills roster is. I refuse to pick a team led by a quarterback that threw 84 passes last year to beat a team led by Josh Allen. Just refuse to do it. Okay, if I'm wrong about Richardson and he ends up being much better than I'm expecting for him to be in year 2, then the Colts should have a chance. But I'm expecting Richardson to be above average. I don't think he's going to be great. I don't think he's going to be terrible either. But you need a superstar at quarterback to beat guys like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And the Colts just don't have that. They just don't. So chalk up that week 10 game against the Bills as a loss. The Colts' second won't win game of the season comes in week 12 against the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are potentially the best team in the NFC. That's a team that is more than capable of going on a run to the Super Bowl, right? Like that's just what they are. Jared Goff has been really good under Ben Johnson, right? The Lions offensive coordinator who is somehow, some way not a head coach yet. Right. The Lions are also going to be much better on defense. They went out in free agency because, believe it or not, Chris Ballard, you can go and get good players in free agency. The Lions went out and they added a couple good defensive pieces. They drafted the defensive side of the ball pretty well on top of that. And those are the only 2 games that coming into the season, I feel like the Colts have no chance of winning, which isn't very many. Every other game is incredibly winnable. Okay, week 10, I don't think that they can beat Josh Allen. I don't think that that's an absurd take. Then in week 12, I don't think they can beat arguably the best team in the NFC in the Detroit Lions. That's it. So that gives us a Colts baseline of 2 losses on the season, right? And look, it's obviously going to be more than that, but it's going to be at least that many, okay? Every other game on their schedule is incredibly winnable. Now we get to the might win games. Every divisional game for every team, no matter how good or how bad, divisional games are all, in my book, put down as might wins. Okay, I just kind of I pencil everyone in to go 500 in their division because divisional games are hard. They are, no matter how good your team is, no matter how bad your opponent is. I expect everyone to go around 500 in their divisions because those are the teams that know you the best. Right? Like no matter how well your team is playing, you know that your divisional opponents are going to be ready for you. So I put every divisional game down as a might win, right? They all tend to be toss-ups. So if the Colts can finish it around 500 in divisional play, I would call that a success. Right? Now, on to the other games. There are 5 games in this season that are going to dictate how we feel about the Colts. Right, so outside of the divisional games, which are 6, the must-win games, or excuse me, the should-win games, which there's 4 of those, and the won't-win games, there are 2 of those. There are 5 games left. All right, and if I'm right on the Colts' 4 should-wins, if I'm right on the 2 games that the Colts are going to lose, and if they go 3-3 in divisional games, that puts the Colts at 7-5 on the season. Okay, so these other 5 games are going to play a huge role in how we look at the Colts. If they go 5-0, we look at the Colts as a 12-5 team that probably wins the division. They go 4-1, that's 11-6, 3-2, that gets them to 10-7. That probably earns you a wild card spot, right? So these other tough toss-up non-divisional games are going to play a huge role in the Colts' success this season. And the first one we see, the first might win game of the season, comes in week 2 against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Jordan Love was great last year. I think Matt LaFleur is a good head coach. Early in the season, though, I think the Colts are going to have an advantage. People haven't seen a lot of Anthony Richardson, and so they don't fully know what to expect. They don't know how to fully prep for him, which that very much bodes well for the Colts and a coach in Shane Steichen, who is, I think, one of the best game planners and one of the best play callers in the sport. So I like the Colts' chances early because teams just don't know what to expect, right? Especially teams like the Packers that play in the NFC. Okay, like this is a very winnable game for the Colts, but Packers are a good team. That's why it's a might-win game. It is on the road at Lambeau Field. Good news, earlier in the season, so the Colts aren't going to be playing in the snow or anything crazy like that. That first important game of the year that the Colts need to win comes in week 2 against the Green Bay Packers. The Colts' second non-divisional might-win game of the season comes in week 4 against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. I have no idea what to expect from the Steelers. Is Russell Wilson going to be the starter? Is Justin Fields going to be the starter? I don't know. Either way, like neither one of those guys really scare me, right? Like when I first saw the game, I was like, oh, this is a should-win game. But you have to remember that Mike Tomlin is the head football coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? And look, he's one of the best coaches in the sport. There's a reason why he's never had a losing season, right? In his entire coaching career, no matter how good or bad his quarterback was or anything like that. And he's going to have the Steelers ready, and they're going to be good defensively, right? Like that's just who the Steelers are. And the Steelers went out and they picked up a couple good defensive pieces in the offseason, some through the draft, some through free agency. For example, they went out and they got Patrick Queen. That's a fast, physical, run-stopping linebacker from the Ravens. And because the Steelers are going to have a lack of elite quarterback play, means that the Colts have a chance to beat the Steelers in week 4, but it's really hard for me to bet against the guy in Mike Tomlin. The Colts' third non-divisional might-win game of the season comes in week 7 against the Miami Dolphins. And I think that when a lot of Colts fans see this game, I think that they chalk it up as a loss. Look, full disclosure, grew up a Miami Dolphins fan, still pull for them. Just part of who I am. Here's the truth on the Dolphins. The Dolphins had to let a lot of players go due to cap reasons after last year. Also, this is not a very physical football team down in Miami. And I expect the Colts to be very physical this season. Okay, like with a guy and Anthony Richardson who can obviously run the ball and one of the best running backs in the league, I expect the Colts to be physical. I expect them to push teams around, and the Dolphins are 1,000% a team that you can push around. So in week 7, when the Dolphins come up here to play at Lucas Oil Stadium, I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts push the Dolphins around at home and won. I also wouldn't be surprised, though, if the Colts secondary couldn't defend these Dolphin receivers. That, to me, is why this is a toss-up might-win game. Third might-win game of the season comes in week 7 against the Dolphins. The Colts' fourth non-divisional might-win game of the season comes in week 9 against the Vikings. This is entirely dependent upon J.J. McCarthy because I think he's a complete wild card. I have all the faith in the world in Kevin O'Connell to turn him into a good quarterback, but no rookie quarterback is a guarantee, no matter how good the head coach is. So if McCarthy isn't that guy, then this could easily turn into a should-win game for the Colts. I would lean Colts on that one before the season starts, but I want to see what J.J. McCarthy looks like at that point in the season before I switch it one way or the other. The Colts' fifth and final non-divisional might-win game of the season comes in Week 5 against the Broncos. I thought this was going to be another should-win game for the Colts, right? Because I don't think that the Broncos are going to be very good this year, and the Colts have a bye in Week 14. I was like, oh, they have a bye, getting ready for a team that's not very good. Pencil it in as a should-win. But then I realized the Broncos also have a bye in Week 14, and as look, the Broncos went 8-9 last year with one of the worst rosters in the NFL, especially because of Russell Wilson and just how bad he was. And playing Sean Payton coming off of a bye week is just never fun. It's just not. It's hard to count out a coach like him coming off of a bye week. Like, the Broncos are going to be extremely prepped and ready for the Colts. In addition to that, I think Shane Steichen is going to have these guys ready as well. I think that the talent of the Colts roster it could very easily overwhelm the Broncos. That's how bad that Broncos roster is. I'm talking about the Colts talent overwhelming them. Like, that's how terrible of a roster that they have. So that is the fifth and final non-divisional might-win game of the season. So after having gone through all of that, the Colts should finish somewhere between 7-10 and 12-5. And those 5 games that I just went through are going to determine whether or not the Colts win the division, whether they make the playoffs, or if they have a failure of a season, right? We're going to track these games all year long. We're going to see if I'm right or not on these should win games. We're going to see if I'm right or not on these probable losses games, right? September 8th, week 1 against the Texans cannot get here soon enough. Can't get here soon enough. I can't wait for it. I was talking to my boss before I came in here. I was like, I'm ready for football season. And his response was, September's a long way away. And he's right. It is. What is not a long way away, though, Game 6, Pacers Knicks tomorrow night at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, coming up here in 4 minutes. Tony East of Locked On Pacers is going to join me to talk Game 6 and a little bit of what happened in Game 5. That's coming up here in about 4 minutes. What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Don't forget to download that Indy Sports Ticket app. And don't forget to go to YouTube and Twitter to watch the live stream because that's just how we do things now. Joining me on the phone, Tony East of Locked On Pacers, covers obviously the Pacers and a little bit of the Fever as well. Before we talk hoops, I know that you're very active on Twitter, and I have to know, with the
Definitely.
NFL's schedule release coming out last night, did you see any of the videos? Is there any one of them that really stuck out to you?
I only saw the Chargers one. The Sims. They did like the swimming in the pool with Sims characters. That's it.
Yes.
I did not see any of the rest. It's too much. I like it. The concept is good, but they're going like too over the top. I just want to see a list of the opponents in the order they'll be played and where. That's it.
Okay. All right. Then. So
boring.
you should just go to the Colts Twitter page because that's basically all that they did.
Good. That's what it should be about.
Okay. So let's move into the Pacers, though, really quick. I want to ask you just two very short questions about Game 5. How disappointed were you in the effort from Game 5?
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, and the rebounding is just the most frustrating, I think, way to lose as a team. Like, it's so deflating to get a stop or even play good defense for name an amount of time, 15, 20 seconds, whatever. And then you don't get the rebound, the other team scores anyway. That's deflating. And that happened like 20 times, right? Like that's as frustrating as it gets for a player. And at some point you would think, that you'd hit back, right? Like in the first 4 games of the series, the rebounding battle was 168 to 160, right? That's close. They hit back. They found a way to be physical and play their game and hit the boards. They never did it in Game 5, ever. They got smoked on the 24 rebound difference, 29 more shots. Like that's basically like pretend a whole quarter happens and the Knicks only shoot and the Pacers never shoot. Like that's unfathomable to imagine, and that's what happened in this game. So, it's so disappointing to see that kind of, in a huge Game 5 kind of effort. Like we saw them be better in that building twice, even though they lost the first 2. Like it's as bad as it gets, and very frustrating for the Pacers to see them play that way, and that they can't play their style. It was just like a triple whammy of a disaster.
Yeah, it was really rough. I think part of why they couldn't, the Pacers couldn't play their style was because of Halliburton's lackluster performance in Game 5. I didn't think it was entirely his fault. Like, if we did blame pie, I'd put 30% on the blame for his performance on Halliburton. I'd put about 30% on Carlisle, and I'd put 40% on the Knicks for defending him so well. I thought that the Knicks were just really smart. They denied him the ball, and Halliburton did a poor job of working his way open, and Carlisle didn't really scheme up anything to take advantage of that coverage. What did you think of Halliburton's Game 5 performance, and do you kind of agree with my assessment?
Yeah, so the Knicks starting lineup change is an interesting factor in this because, you'd see what happened is Pacers would get into their first action, and Ty would give it up sometimes, and then wherever he went on the floor, it did not matter. He was 40 feet from the rim in the corner of the dunker spot. He was never the dunker spot, but I'm just giving examples. Deuce McBride's just following him, like right next to him, right? And so the hope is, if you're the Knicks, that the Pacers will be deterred from giving him the ball back, right? And instead would try to attack 4-on-4 with space. And so I understand if you're Rick Carlisle thinking, oh, this is great. We have 4-on-4 with a ton of space, but it wasn't working at all. So that's where you go back to what you said about trying to either find a way to get Halliburton back into the play off the ball or trying to find a creative way to score in those 4-on-4 settings, which they couldn't really do. And, the Knicks with their smaller group with McBride were like pressuring full court. So the Pacers took them longer to get into their actions too. So they couldn't really get into the second stuff as much. Like everything was just slower. So it wasn't all about the starting lineup change. Like Halliburton said himself, he's got to be better. He's got to be more aggressive and all that. And I get that, but so much was just not Pacers-y, and a lot of that comes back to him. And they've got to find a way to get him better because they can't hit their ceiling if he's at that level.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. How do you think Halliburton responds here in Game 6? I think he's going to play great.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, every time he's had a lackluster postseason game where this has been the discussion after it, he's been good in the very next one, right? Game 2 of the first round, Game 6 of the first round, Game 2 of this round. People were talking like, "Oh, Halliburton on the road's been terrible." I'm like, he just had 34 points in the game right before this in MSG. Whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't win, so I get why people thought that. Like, yeah, he's always bounced back, and one of his super. I think I said this to you last week. Like, one of his superpowers, which is good and bad as a player, is like when he gets shut down, the very next game when he figures out the coverage, he looks a lot better. Now the problem is there's a game where he got shut down, right? That's bad.
Yeah.
But the good part is he always figures it out and is much better in the second one as he was earlier in this very series. So I assume he'll be better and the Pacers will be better. But there's a lot of like new variables to this with the Knicks' new lineup. The Knicks saw that if they play their game as best they can, they look amazing in this series. And for the first time in this whole series, this hobbled science experiment of a Knicks team that's so banged up has 2 days off. And I think that's going to be really significant. So I think Halliburton will be better, but I think the Knicks will have the most energy they've had literally the whole series. Like, this is close to as long of a gap before a game as we've seen since before Game 1. So I'll be fascinated to see what it looks like.
So I'm really curious to hear your response to this, because I have a crazy idea that I will follow up with. But you mentioned the Knicks going to McBride in the starting lineup. How do you think the Pacers combat the Knicks going small? Because like I thought that we'd see this in Game 5, because in Game 4 the Knicks started the third quarter like that with 4 guards. And I was like, oh, if they're going to go small, then the Pacers should dominate the glass. I like this for the Pacers. And then Hartenstein was like, no, I'm going to dominate the glass. And so how do you think the Pacers respond to that lineup from the Knicks?
Yeah, you're right that we saw it in the second half of Game 4, which I think why the Pacers said they expected it, right? They were kind of preparing for it, even though how it actually looks and what it actually does is different than just expecting that it's coming. I think that a couple things stand out to me. One is whoever Josh Hart is on, right? Because he was I'll put air quotes on this, even though no one can see, the foreman in that group, right? Whether it's Siakam or Turner or whoever it is in the front court, like that player has to be involved a lot, just because they have such a massive height advantage that even if they're not dominating from a skill perspective, they can get so many open shots, even if it's contested. Like Siakam was crushing that at times in Game 4. Didn't see that as much until the fourth quarter in Game 5. And so getting him involved, whether he's the screener, whether he's just posting up early in the clock, something that lets him get going and just be like, hey, I'm 6 inches taller than that guy, I'm going to shoot. Or if it's Turner, same idea. Like, he was really good in Games 3 and 4 of the first round when he had a favorable matchup, like getting him involved. That's the first thing I would do as the Pacers. Second thing is mix up defensive matchups, right? We saw this a little bit in Game 2, but like even from minute to minute, if you can, it's really hard to do that, but switch who's guarding who, and then it's harder for the Knicks to instantly figure out who Halliburton is on and use him as a screener. Give them like 1 extra second, 2 extra seconds to figure out the alignment and make them think, because they were not thinking at all. In the first half of Game 5, it was, okay, Halliburton's man, come up, set a screen. Oh, he messed it up. Great, we get a shot. Like, it happened over and over. So that kind of thing I think will be valuable. Getting the bigs more involved, if they're so small again, will be valuable. And you're right that intuitively, even Carlisle said this after Game 5, the size advantage should lead to rebounding, but that's what the Knicks do. They get boards, and maybe it's not going to be the case. Hartenstein's very good, so they've got to find ways to be better elsewhere.
What would you think if the Pacers went like jumbo package, really big, like play Siakam at the 3, Jackson at the 4, and Miles Turner at the 5?
Wow.
Because
we've seen it. Go ahead.
You go.
Well, I was going to say, we saw early in the series a few times where they went Siakam 3, Toppin 4, and then either Jackson or Turner at the 5. And those were good groups, and that was only possible because the Knicks were smaller. That happened specifically, too, after OG got hurt. So they were really punishing, like, the Hart at the 4 groups or a 2 at the 5 kind of stuff. And I like that look. It was doing well for them. But then when the Knicks were ready for it in Game 3, it didn't work so well. What they started doing instead was the opposite. They'd go, oh, it's Sims or a 2 at the 5. Let's go Siakam top in front court again and play with speed and make that guy defend in space. And that has worked. Siakam Toppin has been a wonderful front court for the Pacers, but I just really wonder what direction they'll go. I like the idea that you said, though. We saw that in the first 2 games being really successful, just huge. And you can even in those groups go with Shepard or Nesmith at the 2 and keep that size rolling down the lineup, right? So if you have to have enough skill to keep up with the Knicks and their physicality, you can't combat them just straight up size with size because of how they play. But if you can add skill to that size, that gives you an advantage the Knicks don't have, which with Siakam, Toppin, and either Turner or Jackson. Turner, Jackson's finishing in the paint's been awesome this series. That gives you enough skill to keep up with their size. So I like going back to that in Game 6 if they can, but it might depend on how the Knicks align because a lot of that has been in response to what they're doing.
Yeah, we'll see. I just think that I just don't think that outside of Jalen Brunson, the Knicks offense is very good. It feels to me like their best offense is Jalen Brunson, followed by getting an offensive rebound. Like, and I just think if you can eliminate the offensive rebounds, which I think it'd help if they went big, because I thought that part of why Hartenstein was so successful on the offensive glass in Game 5 was because it was him and Miles Turner, and people were obviously upset about the Miles Turner only having five rebounds in Game 5.
He had a bad game.
I didn't think it was entirely his fault. I thought he would, like, the Pacers couldn't contain the dribble, and so he'd have to go help and contest the shot, leaving Hartenstein open to then grab rebounds. So I didn't think that it was entirely his fault. What'd you think of Miles Turner's play as a whole in Game 5?
Yeah, the early third quarter stretch, like you saw what impact he could have not rebounding.
Yeah.
He even said after the game, like, I didn't rebound good enough. I'm with you though. Like my thesis, for lack of a better term, on some but not all of the rebounds is the hardest time to get a rebound as a defense or like properly box out is when you're scrambling, right? So let's pretend they send two guys to Brunson, and then he really quickly gets it to Hartenstein, who kicks it to a shooter. So like no one is specifically guarding Hartenstein or the shooter in that moment. So when guys box out and they turn around and they look for the closest player, two guys go to one person a lot. And so there's a fifth player who has a free pass to the rim, and if it's Josh Hart or Hartenstein, they get the rebound every time. And so like that, their defensive scheme, we saw it work for 2 games. Like I get why they did that, but it does lead to challenging rebounding scenarios when you're scrambling or communicating or rotating a lot. And I think that goes back to what you just said too, where if someone gets beat in those situations, Turner is often the guy who's required to step up and cover it or rotate over. And I don't fault him for those rebounds at all. You know, someone else has to crack down and get the big in those moments. And we've seen what Hartenstein can do all series, but there were some, and he even admitted it at his locker after the game where he said, yeah, I've got to be better at getting them. So, you know, to him specifically, he's got to be better on the glass, although his offensive impact was still strong. And if he's guarded by Josh Hart, he needs to do that again. But at the same time, it's kind of the whole Pacers team thing. If they just defend better in general communication, their box outs will naturally be better. And I think that's a big factor for them.
Without a doubt, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. So this is going to become a topic of discussion once the season ends. It kind of already has. I know I've talked about it a little bit on my show. Would you give Siakam the max this offseason?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I get why it's a discussion, but so here's the thing. If he is willing to negotiate to the extent that that's even a conversation you can have, I don't even know what to call that. Like, yeah, I guess, but the reason that you could consider negotiating through the Pacers, the Pacers can offer him 5 years and no one else can, right? So they can, by default, offer him more money too. But like, if the alternative is lose him, like if he says, give me the max or I'll go to name a team with cap space, Orlando, Philly, Detroit, whatever, then you have to. You have to. And I think that maybe he has not been quite 30% of the cap good in the playoffs. He's been really good to me. Like, yeah. I think you just keep him. You just have to and go from there. If you give him 5 years, you line him up with Halliburton contractually. Like, you just do it and figure out later. And, you know, people will, and I think this should be a discussion, and I will talk about it too, like, be worried about what will happen when he's 35 at the end of it. And I think if you're the Pacers, you got to hope it turns out like Drew Holiday, where everybody said when they signed it, uh-oh, this is going to be bad. He's going to age into this. And then Drew Holiday was awesome for all 5 years of that contract. But there are guys like John Wall who have been awful by the end of it too. So the hope would be for the Pacers that you get 5 good years, but you just never know. But I would give them the max to the Pacers, I think.
Okay. I think I would, just because it's, like, with all due respect to the great state of Indiana, like, it is Indiana and star players just don't want to come here. And Siakam seems to like being here. So, I mean,
even as a re-signing, it's the best unrestricted free agent they would ever get if they kept him, right? Like, it's a huge deal.
It is. So, with that being said, do the Pacers win tomorrow night? And if so, what are their chances to win Game 7?
Yeah, you know, it's funny in this series, like, through the first 3 games, I said, no matter what happens at any point in the first 3 quarters, I'm just assuming it's going to be a 5-point game in the last 5 minutes. And then the last 2 games have been just disastrous 30-point blowouts. But I think now that the Knicks have imposed their style a bit, and the Pacers know what they need to do to combat that. We're going to get back to a close game, and the home teams won every game. So I think my prediction for the series is the Pacers will win like a 4 or 5 point game 6, and then lose game 7 in MSG. It's just so tough to win there. But if the Pacers want their optimism, one, they've shown that they can beat the Knicks. 2, there's a short turnaround ahead of game 7, and the Knicks are banged up and injured. And we saw what they looked like in game 4 after a short turnaround. And 3, they'll have the momentum after winning game 6 if they make it back to MSG. So I totally think it's possible the Pacers can still win this series. Again, they've proven they've beaten this team in the regular season and this postseason series. But game 6 will be the toughest one, I think, with the rest the Knicks will have. And home court advantage has been huge. They've got to protect it if they want a chance, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. No, most definitely. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Two more questions for you, and then I will let you go. I meant to ask you this earlier and just forgot. So I watch like every sports media thing out there. It's probably not good for me, but it's just kind of what happens. Did it bother you at all that people kind of coddled Anthony Edwards after he was bad in his game 5, and they ripped Halliburton after he was bad in game 5?
Yeah, I think the reason that the difference happened is that Ant was just so ridiculously good every other postseason game before that one, whereas Halliburton's kind of had up and down moments. But yeah, I mean they have to, and I think you're right that there has to be a little more balance there, because Halliburton would average 30 and 8 the 3 games before that one. Like clearly he can be really good in this series. But yeah, that just kind of comes with the territory of how well you played for the whole postseason. And Halliburton had some dominant games. Edwards has had only dominant games, I feel like, up until that game 5, where admittedly, you're right, he was not where he needed to be. And now the Nuggets have just completely transformed that series. So I get what you're saying, and I do think there is a lot of, two-facedness of coverage of every athlete in every sport. But that one specifically, at least the background makes it justifiable what's going on.
Yeah, without a doubt. Last question, and I'll let you go. Caitlin Clark's debut was a little rough. Her second game tonight. What are your expectations for her tonight? What's your reaction to her debut? And yeah, I'll just kind of give you the floor after that.
Yeah, the shooting percentage now needed to be 10 turnovers is too many. I think that for most fans who know nothing of the rest of the W, that was the perfect game, because they could see how good the Sun are and Alyssa Thomas is, and what is actually going to be like for Caitlin in the league. That said, I think she'll be better going forward. One, because I watched in the preseason where she was better than that, literally, against WNBA players. 2, the turnovers, a lot of them were like half her fault, half a teammate like not being ready for the ball. So all it takes is a couple more shots dropping and like 10 to 6 turnovers, and she'll look way better. Yeah. So I think she can be a lot better in the second game with a home crowd tonight. Liberty are in town. That said, I mean, the Fever schedule to start the season is unbelievably hard. They play every other day. They play a lot of the best teams in their first 10 games. Like, it's very possible to me they could be like 2-8 or 3-7, despite being much better than they looked last season. So it's going to be fascinating to see if they can get some wins when they can, and how much better, if any, she looks against a very good Liberty team tonight on her home floor for the first time.
Yeah, the Liberty are pretty good. They've got Sabrina. What's her name? The shooter from Oregon.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. There it is. So, like, this is, you can make an argument. Clark and Sabrina, we've got the 2 best shooters in the WNBA tonight, right?
Oh, I'd have to think hard about that one. Sammy Whitcomb might have something to say about that. Sophie Cunningham might have something to say about that. But yes, 2 of the best for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Tony, thank you for your time as always. Hopefully next week when I'm talking to you, we're talking about an Eastern Conference Finals. Hopefully, we'll see. If not, it'll probably be some Caitlin Clark stuff, which is really good as well. So, Tony, thank you for your time, man.
You got it, man. Take care.
Sweet. That was Tony East of Locked On Pacers. He also covers the Indiana Fever as well. I appreciate him taking the time. He walked off of the court for the Fever shoot around for tonight just to make time for me. So thank you, Tony. Coming up here in about 4 minutes, I've got more stuff on the Colts schedule release. I'm going to identify their easiest 4-game stretch where we all feel great about the Colts, and I'm going to identify their toughest 4-game stretch where we're all hitting the panic button, freaking out because the Colts went 1-3 over this 4-game stretch. That's coming up here in about 4 minutes. Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. However you're listening, whether that's via the app. If you don't have the app, feel free to go to the App Store or the Google Play Store to listen. And you can listen every day from 11 to noon. And make sure you leave that app on to listen to the Dan Dockett Show. Maybe you're watching live on Twitter. Maybe which if you want to watch live on Twitter, that's at Ticket1430. Maybe you're watching via the YouTube. Just go to Twitter, search for Indies Sports Ticket, and you can subscribe there. Maybe you're just in your car. Maybe you're listening the old-fashioned way. You just, got the good old AM radio cranked up and ready to go. And I want to go back to the Colts because I know there's some people out there, they don't care about the schedule release. I do. It just gets me excited. I love football. Okay. If you can see me on the stream, I'm wearing a bunch of Arkansas stuff today. It just kind of happened. I woke up, I looked at my laundry pile, and I was like, I don't think I've had this much dirty laundry since I was in college. And so I was like, what am I going to wear today? And I, try not to wear my Arkansas stuff around because this is Indiana and people don't care about it. But hey, clean clothes better than dirty clothes. Just saying. So anyway, as I was saying, the Colts schedule came out yesterday. And there's always, there's obviously everybody goes through the matchups and we look at the games and we circle the ones that are big. We circle the ones that we think the Colts are going to win. You cross out the ones that you think that the Colts are going to lose. And then at the end of it, you're like, oh, the Colts should go blank. Okay, the Colts should go somewhere between 7-10 and 12-7 this year, right? That's where I've fallen. That's where the Colts should fall somewhere within that range. If the Colts don't win 7 games, it's probably because Anthony Richardson got hurt, which is a real possibility given his history of injuries, in college and high school and every place that he's played. So in addition to looking at games and identifying the winnables and the losables and all that kind of stuff, I also like to identify the important stretches for the Colts. Like what are what is the 4-game stretch that the Colts need to win? What is the 4-game stretch that the Colts just need to survive? Like if they go 2-2 during this 4-game stretch, because that's roughly a quarter of the season, if they go 2-2 during that stretch, then hey, that's great. So let's start with the easiest stretch of the Colts season, right? The stretch where the Colts need to go 4-0 or 3-1, right? To stay on track to potentially make the playoffs or even win a division, something that they haven't done during Chris Ballard's time here. And that stretch for me, the stretch where the Colts need to go 3-1 or 4-0 is weeks 13 through 17. Week 13, they play the New England Patriots, a team that's going to be one of the worst teams in the league. That is a game that they really need to win, right? And then they follow that up with a bye week in week 14. Following the bye week, they play the Broncos, another team that's not going to be very good. Have to be wary of Sean Payton, one of the best coaches in the NFL. And then week 16, they get the Titans, the team that I think is going to be the worst team in the AFC South. They have the worst quarterback of the 4 teams. Look, I'm not the biggest Anthony Richardson fan just because I haven't seen a ton from him. But I've seen a lot of Will Levis going back to last year, watching him when he was at Kentucky. I don't think he's very good. He's the worst quarterback in this division. The Colts have the Titans at home. That's a game that they should win. And then they close out this 4-game stretch by playing the Giants, another team that's arguably going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. At this point in the season, the Giants could be looking to lose games so that they could have a higher draft pick, while the Colts are looking to potentially make the playoffs. So that, 4 out of their last 5 games to close the season, those are they need them. They need all 4 of them probably at that point. So if the Colts can enter week 13 at 500, right, that'd be 6-6, and then go 4-0, really good chance at making the playoffs. If they can come into that week at 7-5, then I think that their chance of making the playoffs are extremely high, right? So that week 13 through week 17 stretch is going to be really important for the Colts and their success on the season. The stretch that the Colts need to survive are weeks 5 through 8. That is a really rough stretch for the Colts. They have 3 games on the road against divisional opponents. So week 5, they're at Jacksonville, a place that the Colts haven't won in forever, right? So that's going to be a tough game. And then they're at Tennessee, on October 13th. And then they get Miami at home, who I think is going to pose some issues for the Colts, given how explosive the Dolphins are on the offensive side of the ball. And then week 8, they're at Houston, which the fact that they're going to play Houston twice in the first 8 weeks is kind of absurd, considering that they played them week 1 here in Indy. But week 8, they're at Houston. Like that 4-game stretch, like that's 3 divisional games, which are always big. And then that game against Miami is going to be tough. Like that is 1,000% a week that is 1,000% a 4-week stretch that the Colts could go 0-4. That week 5 through week 8 stretch. Otter Creek chiming in here, saying that he thinks that I'm wrong about Will Levis. Plus, he has way better receivers. Calvin Ridley, I don't think has been that good. He's a really flashy name. Do I wish the Colts had him? Yes, I'd rather the Colts have him than not have him. But he wasn't that great in Jacksonville last year. He wasn't. And now he's going to go to a team with Will Levis, who, look, you can say whatever you want about Will Levis. You may think he's better than Anthony Richardson. You may think he's going to end up being good. I don't. But he's not better than Trevor Lawrence. He's just not. Also, new head coach, new offensive system. I believe that they hired the Cincinnati Bengals former offensive coordinator. I didn't think that the Bengals offense was that great. I thought that they just had Joe Burrow, and that's kind of why they were successful. But the Will Levis thing, look, he's got a big arm. He's physical, but he's not very accurate in the intermediate. And yeah, and yes, they have Calvin Ridley, but their best wide receiver is Treylon Burks, who's always hurt, and they don't have a great tight end. Like, I don't think that the Titans roster is just littered with offensive weapons. And look, you can have the best weapons in the world. Doesn't matter if the guy that you have under center doesn't throw the ball very well. So, yeah, I have no faith in the Titans whatsoever. I think that they're going to finish last in the AFC South. I don't think that they're going to be very good this season. Someone who I think is going to be much better tonight than they have been previously is Caitlin Clark. They're playing tonight at, I believe, 7 o'clock against the Liberty. That's going to be at Gainbridge. Also going to be available via Amazon Prime. Going to be on Prime Video. The Fever are 7.5-point underdogs. The New York Liberty are, those are one of the best. That's one of the best teams in. That's one of the best teams in the WNBA. Otter Creek bringing up DeAndre Hopkins for the Titans. He's old, man. Like, he's old, past his prime. I know he was good last year, but I'm not worried about the Titans. I don't think that they're going to be very good. Because once again, you can have the greatest weapons in the world. It doesn't matter if your quarterback isn't very good. Also doesn't matter if you can't run the ball. And so, with Derrick Henry leaving, I think that the Titans are in this really weird transition period where they're going from this Mike Vrabel style team where they're physical and they have an identity, and they're kind of in the middle of switching that identity. And I just think that when you're in the middle of a transition like that, things just don't go very well in year one. So on top of that, once again, I don't think Will Levis is very good. I don't. Watching him play last year, I know he threw some good deep balls, but you got to be able to do more than that to win in the NFL. And if that's all that you can do, then you better be able to run the football, which I don't think that the Titans are going to be able to do very well this year, because I don't like their running backs. Like Tony Pollard, whoop-de-doo. Congratulations. He's okay. He's fine. So, yeah, not a big fan of the Titans this year. So, but anyway, back to the Fever. I think we're going to see a much better showing from Caitlin Clark tonight, playing at home, having the home fans behind her. Very interested to see what the turnout is. How loud is it? Cannot wait to see how all of that goes. That's going to do it here at The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Dan Dawkins Show coming up next. He'll be on from noon to 3. Make sure you download that Indy Sports Ticket app to listen to him. We'll be live on the app and obviously in your car on 14:30 a.m. Tomorrow, a lot more Pacers stuff, right? Tomorrow night, Game 6. Going to get into all that. Hoping to have Zach Gray on tomorrow at 11:40. We'll see. Hopefully he's not too overly busy tomorrow, and he's able to make a little bit of time for us. Hopefully he'll have some picks for us as well. That is all happening tomorrow. The Dan Dawkins Show is coming up next here on Indy Sports Ticket. I will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11.